The ultimatum. The holographic projection flickered to life in the center of Earth's emergency war room, casting an eerie blue glow across the faces of humanity's last hope. The alien figure that materialized was imposing, standing nearly 10 feet tall with crystalline skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its four arms spread wide in a gesture that could have been diplomatic, if not for the obvious threat behind its words. Humans of the third planet. The creature spoke, its voice resonating through universal translators with the weight of absolute authority. I am High Chancellor Vextar of the Zentari Empire. For 3,000 cycles, we have ruled this galaxy with wisdom and strength. 147 species kneel before our throne. Today, we extend to you the same honor. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the head of the conference table, her weathered hands gripping the edge as she studied the alien's message. Around her, Earth's military and scientific leaders watched in tense silence. The weight of humanity's future pressed down on the room like a physical force. Your species has shown remarkable tenacity, Vextar continued, his tone carrying what might have been grudging respect. Your expansion into 12 star systems, your resistance to our advanced fleets, your refusal to submit when others would have surrendered immediately. These qualities make you valuable servants to the Empire. Commander Marcus Webb leaned forward, his jaw clenched tight. At 35, he was one of the youngest tactical officers ever to reach his position, promoted rapidly through a series of desperate battles against Centauri scout forces. His dark eyes never left the hologram as he whispered to Chen. Servants. Not citizens, not allies. Servants. Chen nodded grimly. She had expected as much. The Zentari Empire's reputation preceded them across the galaxy. Species that surrendered were incorporated into their hierarchy as worker castes. Those that resisted were either enslaved or exterminated, depending on their usefulness. However, Vextar's tone shifted, becoming harder, more menacing. Your continued resistance has become inconvenient. 3 of our fleets have been delayed by your primitive weapons. This cannot continue. Therefore, we offer you one final opportunity to preserve your species. The projection shifted, showing star charts of human space. Red markers appeared over every human colony, every space station, every world where mankind had planted its flag among the stars. Surrender now. Submit to imperial authority. Your leaders will be executed as examples, but your people will live as servants of the Empire. Your scientists will work in our laboratories. Your soldiers will fight in our armies. Your children will be raised to serve the greater glory of the Zentari. Dr. Elena Vasquez spoke up from her position near the wall, her voice tight with controlled anger. And if we refuse? The alien's expression shifted into what could only be described as a predatory smile. Then your species will be classified as a threat to imperial stability. Every human world will be sterilized. Every ship destroyed. Every trace of your existence will be erased from the galaxy. You have 72 hours to decide. The projection flickered and died, leaving the room in heavy silence. Chen finally spoke, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had just heard. Status report. How bad is it really? Webb activated the tactical display, filling the air above the table with a 3-dimensional map of local space. Red dots representing Zentari fleets vastly outnumbered the blue markers of human forces. The numbers are worse than we thought, Webb said grimly. Intelligence estimates 300 Zentari warships moving toward human space. Each one is twice the size of our largest dreadnought. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours in most areas. We're looking at roughly 10,000 to 1 odds in terms of effective firepower. Conventional tactics won't work, added General Harrison, the grizzled veteran who commanded Earth's ground forces. We've seen what their ships can do. They can glass a planet from orbit in hours. Our defensive positions won't even slow them down. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific mind already working on the problem. At 42, she was humanity's leading expert on alien technology, having spent the last decade reverse engineering captured Zentari equipment. There might be another way, she said slowly. We can't match their firepower, but we don't have to. Chen turned to face her. Explain. The Zentari Empire is vast. 3,000 cycles of expansion means they control thousands of worlds across hundreds of light years. But that size is also their weakness. They're dependent on massive supply chains, central command structures, and core industrial worlds to maintain their fleet. Webb caught on immediately. You're talking about asymmetric warfare. Hit their infrastructure instead of their fleets. Exactly. They expect us to meet them in conventional battle, ship to ship, fleet to fleet. Instead, we bypass their military entirely and target the systems that keep their empire running. Chen studied the galactic map that Vasquez had pulled up, showing the sprawling network of Zentari space. It would be suicide. We'd have to send small strike forces deep into enemy territory with no support, no backup, and no hope of rescue if things go wrong. Maybe, Vasquez replied, but it's the only chance we have. The Zentari have never faced an enemy willing to strike at their core worlds. They're used to fighting defensive species that try to protect their own territory. They won't expect us to abandon defense entirely and go on the offensive. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. It was a desperate plan, born of impossible circumstances. But as Chen looked around at the faces of humanity's leaders, she saw something that hadn't been there before. Hope. How long would we need? Chen asked. 6 months minimum. Webb replied, already running calculations. We'd need to modify our fastest ships for deep penetration raids, train crews for long-range operations behind enemy lines, and identify the most critical targets in Zentari space. We don't have 6 months, General Harrison pointed out. We have 72 hours. Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of command and the determination that had made her Earth's youngest admiral. Then we buy ourselves time. Send a response to the Zentari. Tell them we need 30 days to organize our surrender. Tell them our political systems require time to transfer authority. Will they believe it? Webb asked. They might. Most species they've encountered have complex bureaucracies. They'll see it as weakness, which works in our favor. Chen turned to address the room. While we're negotiating, we implement Operation Stardust. Dr. Vasquez, I want target analysis on every critical Zentari facility within 50 light years. Commander Webb, begin modifying our fastest ships for extended range operations. General Harrison, start training volunteer crews for one-way missions. The implications of her last words hit everyone in the room. One-way missions. No extraction planned. No hope of return. Ma'am, Webb said quietly, when you say volunteer crews, I mean exactly that, Commander. Every person who goes on these missions needs to understand they're probably not coming back. We can't order people on suicide runs, but we can ask them to volunteer to save humanity. Over the next 24 hours, something remarkable happened. Word of the plan spread through Earth's military, despite all attempts at secrecy. Instead of panic or despair, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of personnel volunteered for the strike missions. Entire ship crews signed up together. Pilots, engineers, tactical specialists, even cooks and medics insisted on being included. Dr. Vasquez worked around the clock, analyzing intelligence data and identifying targets. The Zentari Empire, for all its power, had grown complacent. Their core worlds were heavily defended against conventional fleets, but had minimal protection against small, fast raiders. Their supply depots were scattered across dozens of systems, each one critical to maintaining their war machine. The plan that emerged was audacious in its scope. 50 strike teams would launch simultaneously, each targeting a different critical system. They would hit supply depots, communications relays, industrial facilities, and command centers. The goal wasn't to destroy the Zentari Empire outright, but to cripple their ability to maintain their fleets and coordinate their attacks. Chen stood in the observation deck of the orbital shipyard, watching as the last of the modified raiders was prepared for launch. The ships had been stripped of everything non-essential, loaded with the most powerful weapons humanity could produce, and equipped with experimental stealth systems reverse-engineered from captured Centauri technology. Second thoughts. Webb asked, joining her at the observation window. Every minute, Chen replied honestly. We're betting everything on a strategy that's never been tested against an enemy this powerful. If we're wrong, humanity dies. And if we're right? Chen turned to look at him, and Webb saw something in her eyes that sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't hope or determination. It was the cold, calculating look of someone who had accepted the unthinkable and was prepared to see it through to the end. If we're right, Commander, then the galaxy is about to learn something new about humanity. Something the Centauri should have learned before they threatened to exterminate us. As the ships disappeared into hyperspace, Chen activated the communications array and transmitted humanity's final message to the Centauri High Chancellor. Chancellor Vextar, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You offered us the choice between submission and extermination. We reject both options. Instead, we offer you something your empire has never experienced. A war fought on our terms, by our rules. You wanted to know what humanity is capable of when threatened with extinction. You're about to find out. The Reckoning. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came from the Centauri frontier world of Kethmera. High Chancellor Vextar received the distress signal while reviewing reports of human surrender negotiations in his personal chambers aboard the flagship Dominion's Edge. The transmission was fragmented, filled with static and the sounds of explosions. High Chancellor, under attack. Unknown raiders. Supply depot destroyed. Request immediate. The signal cut to silence. Vextar's forearms tensed with irritation. Human pirates, most likely. Some desperate last gasp before their species accepted the inevitable. He was about to dismiss the report when another signal arrived. Then another. Within the span of 10 minutes, distress calls were flooding in from across the Empire's core sectors. War Master Kreltok burst into the chamber without ceremony, his crystalline features twisted with something Vextar had never seen before. Fear. High Chancellor, we have a situation. Multiple simultaneous attacks across 14 systems. Supply depots, communication relays, industrial centers. The coordination is impossible. Vextar rose from his throne, his massive frame towering over even the War Master. Impossible. The humans have barely 50 functional warships. How can they attack 14 systems simultaneously? That's what I said, High Chancellor. But the reports keep coming. Kethmera's primary supply depot is gone. The communication relay at Vorthan has been destroyed. The industrial complex at Melthar is burning. As if summoned by their conversation, another aide rushed in with a datapad. Kreltok's expression grew darker as he read. 17 systems now. The attacks are continuing. Vextar studied the tactical display that materialized at his gesture. Red warning lights marked the locations of attacks across a three-dimensional map of Centauri space. The pattern was unlike anything in the Empire's military history. Instead of concentrated assaults on heavily defended positions, the humans were striking at infrastructure targets that had never been considered military priorities. These facilities are barely guarded, Vextar observed. The humans are attacking civilian industrial sites. Not civilian, High Chancellor. Strategic. Every target they've hit is critical to our fleet operations. Supply depots that feed our advanced fleets. Communication relays that coordinate our battle groups. Industrial facilities that produce our advanced weaponry. The implications began to sink in. The humans weren't trying to fight the Centauri military. They were trying to cripple the Empire's ability to wage war entirely. How long before our advanced fleets are affected? Vextar demanded. Kreltok consulted his datapad, his expression growing more troubled. The Third Battle Fleet is already reporting supply shortages. Without the Kethmera depot, they can't maintain their advance toward human space. The Seventh Fleet has lost communication with Central Command entirely. Over the next 6 hours, the scope of the human strategy became clear. Using small, fast ships that barely registered on Centauri sensors, human strike teams had penetrated deep into Imperial space and were systematically destroying the infrastructure that kept the Empire's military machine functioning. The attacks weren't random. Intelligence analysis revealed a level of strategic planning that shocked the Centauri command structure. The humans had somehow identified the most critical vulnerabilities in an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. They knew which supply depots fed which fleets, which communication relays coordinated which battle groups, which industrial facilities produced which weapon systems. Admiral Sarah Chen monitored the progress of Operation Stardust from Earth's command center, surrounded by displays showing the status of each strike team. The volunteers were performing beyond her most optimistic projections. 43 of the original 50 teams had successfully reached their targets. 37 had completed their primary objectives. 19 had managed to escape and were proceeding to secondary targets. The cost was heavy. 13 teams had been lost, either destroyed in combat or captured by Centauri forces. But their sacrifice was achieving something unprecedented. An empire that had never known defeat was beginning to panic. Status report on the Centauri response, Chen ordered. Commander Webb consulted his tactical display. Confused and fragmented. They're pulling ships back from the front lines to defend their core worlds, but our strike teams are avoiding conventional engagement. By the time their patrols reach an attack site, our people are already gone. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her analysis station. The psychological impact is exceeding projections. Intercepted communications indicate widespread panic among Centauri civilian populations. They've never experienced attacks on their home systems before. Chen allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Centauri had built their empire on the principle of overwhelming force applied to enemy territory, while keeping their own world safe and secure. Now, for the first time in 3,000 years, Centauri civilians were experiencing the fear that their empire had inflicted on countless other species. Phase 2 is ready for implementation, Webb reported. We have secondary targets identified and strike teams in position. Chen nodded. Phase 2 would be even more audacious than the initial assault. Instead of targeting infrastructure, the human raiders would begin hitting Centauri core worlds directly. Not to cause civilian casualties, but to demonstrate that nowhere in the Empire was truly safe from human retaliation. The turning point came on the 4th day of Operation Stardust. Strike Team Alpha 7, led by Captain Maria Santos, successfully penetrated the defenses around Centauri Prime itself, the Empire's capital world. Instead of attacking civilian targets, they broadcasted a message on every communication frequency across the planet. Citizens of the Centauri Empire, Santos' voice rang out across the homeworld of humanity's enemies. Your leaders offered us a choice. Kneel or die. We choose neither. Every day that your fleets threaten human worlds, we will take another piece of your empire. Every supply depot, every industrial center, every strategic asset you possess is now a target. This war ends when you withdraw from human space entirely. Until then, we will burn your empire to its foundations, one facility at a time. The message was broadcast for exactly 30 seconds before Centauri forces managed to locate and destroy Captain Santos' ship. But those 30 seconds changed everything. The Empire's citizens, who had lived their entire lives believing in their military's invincibility, now knew that humans could strike at will against any target they chose. High Chancellor Vexstar stood in his command center, staring at reports of the latest attacks. In 5 days, human raiders had crippled the supply lines of 6 major battle fleets, destroyed communication networks across 40 systems, and demonstrated that they could penetrate the defenses of Centauri Prime itself. Options, he commanded. War Master Kreltok looked exhausted. The past 5 days had aged him visibly as report after report of successful human attacks had arrived. We can redeploy our fleets to defend our core worlds, but that leaves our advance forces without support. We can continue the advance on human space, but our fleets are already running low on supplies and ammunition. What about negotiation? The question came from Intelligence Master Vorthil, one of Vextar's most trusted advisors. The suggestion was unprecedented. The Zentari Empire did not negotiate with inferior species. Explain, Vextar ordered. The humans have demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate. Their strategic planning, their willingness to accept casualties, their ability to strike at targets we considered invulnerable. Perhaps it would be wise to reconsider our approach to this species. Krultok's reaction was immediate and violent. Negotiation with primitives. The Empire does not negotiate with species that should be kneeling at our feet. The Empire also does not typically have its supply lines crippled by primitives, Vorthil replied coolly. Perhaps our assessment of human capabilities was incomplete. Vextar considered the options. The human attacks were causing more damage to the Empire's war machine than conventional fleets 10 times their size could have achieved. But the principle was clear. The Zentari Empire did not negotiate from a position of weakness. Send a message to the human leadership, he finally decided. Offer terms. Complete surrender in exchange for guarantees that their core worlds will be spared. The response came back within hours. It was brief, transmitted on all frequencies so that every ship in both fleets could hear it. Chancellor Vextar, this is Admiral Chen. Your offer is rejected. The terms are as follows. Complete withdrawal of all Zentari forces from human space, recognition of human sovereignty over our claimed territories, and formal acknowledgement that humanity is not subject to imperial authority. You have 24 hours to comply. For every hour past that deadline, we destroy another core facility. The audacity of the demand stunned the Zentari leadership. A species that controlled 12 star systems was dictating terms to an empire that ruled thousands. They cannot be serious, Krultok snarled. Destroy them all. Glass every human world. Show the galaxy what happens to species that defy the empire. But Vextar was studying the tactical displays with growing understanding. The humans had done something no enemy of the Empire had ever managed. They had made the Zentari Empire's size work against it. Every world the Empire controlled was now a potential target. Every facility, every depot, every installation was vulnerable to the kind of surgical strikes the humans had perfected. How many strike teams do intelligence estimates suggest the humans still have operational? He asked. Vorthil consulted his reports. Unknown, High Chancellor. Their operational security is perfect. They could have 50 more teams in position, or they could be down to their last few ships. We have no way of knowing. And that, Vextar realized, was the most terrifying aspect of the entire situation. The Empire was being held hostage by an enemy of unknown strength, fighting a war by rules that no Zentari strategist had ever considered. 24 hours later, Admiral Chen received the formal communication she had been expecting. The message was brief and carried the full authority of the Zentari Empire. Admiral Chen, this is High Chancellor Vextar. After careful consideration, the Empire agrees to your terms. All Zentari forces will withdraw from human space within 30 standard days. Human sovereignty over your claimed territories is acknowledged. The Zentari Empire formally recognizes that humanity is not subject to imperial authority. Chen read the message twice before allowing herself to believe it. Around her, the command center erupted in cheers, but she remained focused on the final paragraph. However, Admiral Chen, understand that this withdrawal is not a surrender. It is a recognition that humanity has proven itself worthy of independent existence. The Empire respects strength, and your species has demonstrated strength. You have earned your place among the stars. Webb appeared at her shoulder, reading over the message. Is it really over? Chen considered the question carefully. The immediate threat to humanity had ended, but the galaxy had fundamentally changed. A species with 12 star systems had successfully challenged an empire that controlled thousands. Other species would take notice. The balance of power that had existed for 3 millennia was shifting. This war is over, she replied finally. But I suspect humanity's real challenges are just beginning. 6 months later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of humanity's first deep space diplomatic station, watching as ships from a dozen different species arrived for the inaugural meeting of what historians would later call the Free Species Alliance. The Zentari Empire still controlled vast territories, but their aura of invincibility was broken. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for generations were beginning to organize, to resist, to demand their own recognition. The message was clear: the age of unquestioned imperial dominance was ending. Humanity had shown that even the mightiest empire could be brought to the negotiating table by an enemy willing to fight smart rather than fight fair. As Chen watched the diplomatic ships arrive, she reflected on the cost of humanity's victory. Hundreds of volunteers had given their lives to prove that humanity would not kneel. Their sacrifice had not only saved their species, but had lit a flame of resistance that was spreading across the galaxy. The Zentari had learned a hard lesson about humanity. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned something new about what was possible when the oppressed refused to accept their oppression. The age of empires was ending. The age of free species had begun. And it had all started with a simple message from a species that refused to kneel. You wanted to know what humanity is capable of when threatened with extinction. Now you know.